All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. Just a real quick video, a few minutes for today, for right now, anyways. So, what are the what are my own best reasons? The things that keep me convinced that Jesus is real. What are the best reasons I feel out there? Simple reasons that don't require quoting and all this and that. There. What's the best proof that we have that Jesus is the real deal? Well, quite simply, and as simple as it sounds, it's the sheer number of Christians that are on this planet. That's one of the good reasons. And let me elaborate. We have 1/3 of the world's population who are Christian. Okay. The number is always growing as well. The world, that's about almost 2.5 billion people on the planet right now are Christian. Now, the world population about 100 or so years ago was, I think, 1, 2, or 3 billion. It has grown exponentially, like a ridiculous rate of population growth around the world just in the last 100 years or so. And you can't take away from the fact that of the near 2.5 billion Christians that are alive today, those numbers aren't even reflected 100 years ago. 100 years ago, the whole world's population was around that. Okay, my point is in the last 100 years, with all of our religious liberties, philosophical liberty, everything, with the growth of science, we never had science like we do now. 100 years ago, science was just starting out in like the 17 and 1800s with their little discoveries, right? But with science and religious liberty and all this and that there, we have that many people who have chosen to be Christian and remain Christian. Okay, that's 2.5 billion people out there. 1/3 of the planet is not deluded or crazy. And of these 2.5 billion Christians, virtually every Christian out there, not every single one, but most Christians would tell you that there is a reciprocation in their faith. They believe in God and Jesus, and certain things happen in their life that reaffirm this: blessings, miracles, this and that there, answered prayers. So it's not just that 1/3 of the world's population are believing something without reason, right? There are reciprocations and affirmations of what they believe is being validated for themselves. The few people who feel they don't get validation are probably the few who end up losing their faith. A lot of Christians who lose their faith end up coming back to it. But at the end of the day, it's the sheer volume of people on the planet who choose to believe in this. In an age where we have religious liberty, you can believe whatever you want, okay? And in the age of science, where science seems to go against everything biblical, okay, and tries to preach against it. So you can't take that away from Jesus. Now, Jesus lived 2,000 years ago, but yet he is the most influential human that ever existed. Okay, even Time Magazine did an article on the most influential person ever. They had their top 10 list, and Jesus was at the top. And Time is not a religious magazine. Okay, Jesus is the most influential figure. And how could one person be so powerful and influential 2,000 years later? There's literally no comparison to Jesus. Okay, on that top 10 list, you have like Napoleon, who was very influential. You have the founder of the Islamic religion. But even still, these pale in comparison to the success that Jesus has had. Now, Jesus didn't go around the world spreading his message. People did it for him. He instructed them to do it. This adds even more credence to his validity because it's not even like he was, super influential, charismatic, and wealthy and could travel the world and convince and brainwash everybody into believing it. The thing is, Jesus himself didn't even do all this. He only spread the message to a few thousands or so. But now we have 2.5 billion people. Why would so many Christians, this is my next good point, and I'm not the only one who said this, even the early church fathers used to argue this case for Jesus. Even a couple hundred years after Jesus walked the earth, the early church fathers saying the same thing, that, all these people have sacrificed their lives, risked their lives to go out around the world and spread the gospel to uncontacted peoples or hostile peoples, and they were converted. Okay, why would anybody, and this is what the early church fathers even said, why would anybody risk their lives? Why would so many people have risked their lives to go do that if they didn't really believe it? And what it gets down to is that The reason why there are 2.5 billion Christians today traces back to this, because Jesus was so real, evidently, and what he did was so miraculous, evidently, that it imparted such a strong need for belief in his believers that their message spread effectively. If he had been a charlatan or a fraud or didn't do miraculous things and such, it wouldn't have been as productive, and he would have faded into history like all the other historical figures do, right? Julius Caesar and all them. All these powerful people are only powerful while they exist, and for a short while after it tapers down and disappears, their support and their following. But with Jesus, his following is alone the only one that has grown the way that it has, and probably the only one that has grown like that over such a long period of time. Instead of his followers tapering down after his death, like everybody else does, his followers only increased after his death. And his followers risked their life and limb to go out to other peoples and spread the gospel. And because they believed that so strongly, because Jesus to them was so real and the importance for it was so real, that's why Christianity spread across the world. Okay, as far as any boats of the time could take them, they spread Christianity to all the regions of the planet. And as of today, it's reached like 95% of the entire planet. Okay, so there is absolutely no doubt that Jesus was real. He had to be real. He had to be miraculous. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for all of those early individuals to risk their lives. A lot of them died too as martyrs. Why would anybody be willing to die or be tortured by pagans and such for somebody that wasn't real, that they never met, and that they have no real reason to believe in, right? People sacrificed of themselves to spread the gospel. The gospel successfully spread, which is something it says in the Bible prophecies Messiah would have to do. He would cause the knowledge of God and the light to go to the Gentiles. Israel itself had never even done that. They never evangelized to the Gentiles ever. Even to this day, they do not do that, right? So the Bible said that the Messiah would come and would spread the light to the world, to the Gentiles. This came true with Jesus and only with Jesus, not even with Israel, okay? And it was so effective, okay? Christianity, in a sense, dominated and conquered the planet. The vast majority of the planet globally, geographically, is Christian nations, okay? Even though the population-wise, it's 1/3 of the planet is Christian, right? But also technically speaking, because Islam believes in Jesus, although they believe in a slightly different version of him, there's 1.5 billion Muslims on the planet. So technically it's around half the world's population. And plus you have a lot of other peoples who believe in Jesus in their own way. They might be New Age, they might even be Buddhist or Hindu, Hare Krishna. A lot of other types of peoples believe in Jesus, right? So it's really half the world's population or more that believe in Jesus, okay? But strictly 1/3 who consider themselves Christian. Okay, this is an accomplishment that nobody else has ever met, reached, and nobody ever will meet or reach this, ever. Okay, only Jesus did. And the only logical reason why Jesus was so successful after his death, after his short life on this earth, where he didn't gain wealth and power or a crown on his head and this and that there, he didn't achieve much physically in his life, but he achieved so much afterwards because he was the real deal. If he hadn't done miracles, if he hadn't risen from the dead, if he hadn't done all those things, then there'd be no reason to believe in Jesus as who he claimed to be, and he would not have spread his influence anywhere near as successfully. There are lots of other peace talkers back in the day. Even amidst the Greeks and Romans, there were hippies who would go and spread peace and love teachings, okay, similar to Jesus. It was nothing new, but Jesus came with that authority and gave a lot more detail on blah, 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 and what we should do and this and that there, and the whole scope and scenario of everything. Okay, he came to enlighten us amongst other things as well, right? So anyways, that's the I feel the best proof for Jesus. Anytime, I'm having spiritual warfare or I'm thinking about doubting or whatever, all I got to do is just remember, look, Jesus was real for those reasons. And on top of that, if Jesus is real, that means God is real. That means the Bible is real, okay? And that everything that goes along with it is real as well. So that's the beauty of it all. And you can't take that away. Like, the followers will never disappear. The 2.5 billion, it's already been done. 2,000 years history proven. Christianity spread across the world. It converted the world away from paganism. 80% of the planet now is not pagan anymore because of the efforts of Christianity. Less than 20% of the planet is pagan. And the majority of that is actually from Hinduism. which are somewhat peaceable people anyways, a lot better than a lot of others on the planet in terms of culture and all that. So the few pagans that remain, most of them are on tribal communities or tribes on islands and hard to reach places and this and that. They're uncontacted tribes and all of that. But virtually everybody else, except for Hinduism and Buddhism, they have converted. Okay, so even the Buddha, if Buddha was real, I'm not saying he was, but even if he was and he had miraculous power, kind of like Jesus is said to have, Buddha existed 500 years before Jesus. He had a lot more time to gain more followers if he was a God man and if he was real. The thing is, even if Buddha was real, he's not as successful as Jesus. He had 500 more years. That's a considerably longer length of time to gain followers in, but there's only about 500 million Buddhists in the world today. And why is that? And Buddhism, ironically, is one of the religions that preaches that humans can do miracles, and allegedly Buddhists can do miracles. Some of the, achieved Buddhists, right? For whatever reason they do them, I don't know, but I'm just saying, right? But despite this miracle working and alleged miracle working of the Buddha, they're still nowhere near as popular. They're what is that? 1/5. They're 20% of the following of Christianity. So there is absolutely no comparison. Islam has 1.5 billion followers. They've had 600 less years to gain those followers in, but they gained the majority of their followers from the start, at least, through forced conversions, right? So there you go. The best evidence is right there in front of your eyes. It's around the world. It's all the Gentiles who turned to God through Jesus. He was the way, and that's how we, in the rest of the world in darkness, found God, found the light, because Jesus opened up that door and showed us the light, the one way in. Right. So anyways, take care, folks, and God bless.